Welcome, everybody. We're going to take the next 20 minutes to talk to you about using Viva Connections to deliver a modern intranet. We're going to be covering this content looking at a couple of client case studies, one for Wales and West Utilities, one for Wincanton, who you've probably seen their lorries on the motorway going up and down. The stories are in much more detail in the brochures on the seat, along with a couple of other customer stories. So with that, we'll probably dive in. Thank you to our sponsors. I know everybody's had to say this, but it is the case. We wouldn't have an event without them. And by way of introduction, my name's Suzy Dean. I'm the Chief Executive at Add-in365. I'm also a Microsoft MVP, and you can catch me on Twitter at Dean of Suzy.
Hi, I'm Wes Hackett. I'm CTO at Add-in365, and Office Apps and Services MVP, which was formerly known as SharePoint way back when.
Add-in365 are a specialist partner of Microsoft for content services and applications, business applications as well, but with a huge range of customers, from those that are in advertising, utilities, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals. So everything you see today are things that we have delivered with multiple sorts of organisations, and it's not really specific to utilities or logistics.
So you've probably heard about Microsoft Viva, this employee experience platform. So it's got 4 pillars. We've got Connections, which is about tailored communications and experiences around Pages and SharePoint, and kind of is a very intelligent wrapper around what's called intranets. We've got Insights as a pillar, which is about analytics at both my personal level. So you might see in Office 365 today, you get a Viva Insights email every day telling you when to book time in your diary. Topics is a tag-based discovery system. And finally, you've got Viva Learning, which is the inbuilt learning management platform. And Microsoft recently acquired a business for OKRs, which will become the 5th pillar within Connections. So we're going to frame the conversation this afternoon around 2 scenarios in the Viva Connections deployments that we've done. The first is around colleague updates and getting messages across your organisation into the hands of those people that need them. So obviously, we are very aware of the conversations today across many other sessions around hybrid, and what does that mean? Hybrid is not just people that are working at home. Hybrid can mean transition between meetings where people are in person, remote, and a combination. And
it's also about those organisations where employees are often on client site. Although there's been a lot of talk today about home versus office working, that only represents 20% of the workforce in the UK. The rest are actually out and about and never did home working during the pandemic.
So there's a couple of interesting stats in the last 18 months. There's some studies that out in the ecosystem that have been talking about colleague updates, news, the feeling of being involved. So we've got Forbes here that are saying that 62% of remote workers don't feel that their work and their effort is appreciated as much as it could be. And then from the Enterprise Times, we've got a number of colleagues feeling that the communications between their manager and their teams, again, isn't as good as it could be. And this fills people with this experience where if I'm not seen, I'm not contributing. And you might have seen this early in 2020 when meeting attendance soared, because it was an easy way for people to feel like they were contributing. And obviously that's being readjusted now in hybrid meetings. But these are important because they factor into both the internal communications facet of centralised communications that go out to the organisation, and they also feature with me, the individual, and how I communicate my updates and success to teams. So we're going to look at 3 sort of challenges in this area that Viva Connections can help address. Firstly is telling the success stories. So how do I get my colleagues to understand what I've been doing, how I've completed something, and the impact that might have on our project. Bringing colleagues together. So how are we able to facilitate the communication at different levels in the organisation? It's not just the central push. And then finally, tailoring the content to my individual needs. So the holy grail of communications has always been tailored communications that arrive at me at the right time. And Viva Connections is now empowering us to actually get quite close to that sort of experience.
So tell us a little bit about Wales and West Utilities before you dive into giving an example.
Sure. So Wales and West Utilities, a gas supply network company out in Wales and the west of the UK. They've got three primary audiences. They have the sort of office roles, HR, finance, IT, those kind of things you'd expect. Customer services that face off to individual members of the public. And then finally the engineers that are standing digging trenches, laying PVC pipes, fixing gas leaks, all over their particular territory. So three very distinct groups of human beings working together as one collective organisation. So for them, telling a success story, firstly, which audience is that appropriate for? If we're looking at improving the response to a leak, and telling everybody across the engineering group how well we did at responding to that, that's a very localised story to the engineering audience. So here we're using the Viva Connections news capabilities and the SharePoint news capabilities together to kind of give a centralised hub, and we're using SharePoint audience targeting to allow the audience boosting effectively to the right and relevant group.
And it's important that it's understood that when we talk about audiences, it's not something different in Viva to what it is in SharePoint. There is just one audience targeting mechanism. It just happens that we have the SharePoint article creation capability, and then separately from that within Viva, we're able to do a couple of pretty cool things now for comms, which have only been available for the last 2 or 3 weeks. One of those is Boost, so that you can keep a story at the top of your news rankings for a period of time or until a percentage of the business has seen it. So you might say, we're happy if 70% of people see this. You can also set mandatory reads so that those will absolutely stay at the top until everybody's read those items. So being able to tell those success stories, whether it's to a specific audience or more broadly, is possible today.
So next challenge is bringing colleagues together. So we've got those three audiences across the Wales and West Utilities organisation. So they've stood up communities around engineering, they've stood up communities around onboarding, they've stood up communities around well-being and diversity and inclusion, and that's helping to bring colleagues together to share knowledge and build up expertise. So you can see here we've combined the power of SharePoint with the power of Yammer to allow people to converse, but also see news and updates and things that are relevant to that particular community space. And then on the Teams side, that combines with the Communities app, in particular project teams or response teams, to allow that sort of cross-pollination of an organisational-wide community into where I'm doing my work.
One of the things we've done at In365 just to make this process easier for organisations is develop a number of starter templates for different types of requirements that you might have as part of your intranet, for example, a community template or a news template or a department template. And this is an example of that where we've already embedded community elements alongside the stories that attach to that. One of the reasons it's worthwhile using Yammer now is that there is an out-of-the-box web component that means it can sit within a SharePoint page, and it allows you to have threaded conversations, to do polls, to give praise, and you can do that. You can grab it and say, I want to have a conversation here, without thinking, as we used to have to, oh, we need to think about how the whole of the Yammer estate is going to. You don't have to do that anymore, and it's really useful because, of course, where you try and do these things in Teams, you can't thread conversations, and so it really is correct and right to use Yammer if you're in a position to do that.
So here we've got the Viva Connections mobile app, which is hot off the press. It's been publicly released for a couple of weeks now. Now, one of the things that is new with the Viva Connections mobile app is, firstly, it's part of Teams. So this little intranet experience, the Viva Connections, is actually the first button on the Teams app. So if you've deployed Teams in your organisation, getting Viva Connections in the hands of your employees is really quite straightforward. It gives us 3 new pivots. It gives Dashboard, which is a personalised set of tools for me. It gives a feed, which we're going to come on to in the next scenario, and it gives resources, i.e. access to all the sites and content across my intranet.
I think the best way to think about this, just before you press play, is that don't worry about, is it a Teams app, is it a SharePoint app, is it a Viva app? It's just the app for your intranet. It's the best way to think of it, because it does bring in SharePoint and Yammer content and Teams content. So where you're starting to read and hear about these things, don't get too caught up in the terminology, just see it as the single app for everything. I'll let you press play because I can't find the play button.
Okay, so here we are on the mobile app. So I'm on the dashboard screen, and I've got a card there that's been presenting to me the top 4 news articles. So it's using the news feed across the organisation. Then we've got the feed itself, which is bringing together the Yammer announcements, the messages across my news experience, things that I've saved for later. So every news article in SharePoint allows me to personally bookmark it. So again, I can come back to these announcements and these news articles at any point that suits me to consume them. So this is a personal feed to me. So for the first time across Office 365, we've got a single place that's unique to me, that brings all the news and all the announcements and all the communications into one active feed.
And as a communications professional, you can also choose third-party information sources to bring into the feed for the specific audiences. So, you know, if you had a trading team, you might have a trading feed, or like Thomson Reuters or something that they generally use, and that can come through into this news feed as well. And for a long time, there have been other products in the marketplace that have done this, and communicators have always been a bit frustrated. You know, we want this to be a place that people find really useful, and of course, it's much less useful if they're also going to 4 other places to receive their comms. So this feed allows you to do that, and it will also pull in your team's notifications. So it's very, very personalised to the individual. Okay, I'm now going to talk to you about new employee onboarding. There are obviously so many scenarios that you would want to address as part of your intranet, but we've only got 20 minutes, which is why we picked comms, a new employee onboarding. One of the reasons for that is a statistic that I think has been read multiple times today, that just under half the workforce are looking to move jobs. And in the UK, there are just shy of 2 million job vacancies at the moment. So when we're thinking about welcoming people into the organisation, we have this additional pressure if we really want to retain them, we want them to have a really good landing experience, and we don't want a failed starter. So there are 3 core challenges that we'll talk to you about today. The first is how to create that excitement of the first day. This is not necessarily about our people onboarding at home or in the office. Even if you're onboarding in the office, the chances are people that 4 or 5 years ago you might have gone around with a box of donuts and said hello to, they might not be in the office. So how to create that excitement of the first day, how to connect with other people and very quickly become part of the communities that can help you to do your job. And thirdly, being able to navigate your organisation's digital estate and actually find the information you need to be productive. So one of the things that we would recommend is developing a new employee onboarding centre or something similar to that. We've got an example template here which pulls together information for me, my first day, and the core resources that I'm going to need to do my job.
So Suzy, this is the example from Wincanton Logistics. Now, one of the interesting pivots for them, that 46% of internal movement, they didn't look at people from just we're leaving the organisation, new starters into the organisation. What they're trying to do is they're trying to boost mobility across the markets they operate in. So we're all very familiar with the Wincanton lorries, but that's one of 7 or 8 different markets they operate in. And actually, what they're looking to do is to make it far easier to move around the group. The mobility of an employee to stay within the family of Wincanton and move role and understand. So a new employee experience with targeted content. So if you're moving from grocery and you're moving into e-fulfillment, so like if you've ever ordered anything on a website and you get the box appear, that's e-fulfillment, is really important for them because they don't want to lose that tacit knowledge of the organisation's working. And also they are benefiting from people's experience moving across markets because it helps them to explore how to do things in a different way, potentially in the existing market. So this experience is really a very core one when you join the organisation, but also reinforcing when you move around.
We've also got mechanisms with Viva Connections that haven't been available previously to help people bed into communities and get the support they need on the first day. You saw in the previous screen you can have a community for newcomers in Yammer, but it's also possible with the Viva Connections dashboard to have a configuration perhaps for an onboarding buddy to help somebody in their role, perhaps somebody in the same team doing the same sort of work to get going. So you can see here that Wes is my onboarding buddy, and I'm reasonably new into the business, and just with that one click from that dashboard I can get straight into a Teams chat with him. I happen to be asking to meet up, but of course I could be having a Teams call to get the information that I need. And just knowing that there's someone there that I can talk to in my first few weeks in the organisation can be really helpful.
So we've combined audience targeting here. So we know in this scenario that I was in the engineering audience, I've moved into engineering. And it also knows by that audience that I'm in my first 4 weeks of employment. So my buddy is potentially different to when I move out of the 4 weeks and move into the next 2 or 3 months. So it allows you to think about onboarding as a journey into the organisation and use that targeting mechanic to change the buddy that's paired up with people, to give easier access to the right person as people go through that experience.
But it's worth saying that about audience targeting more generally anyway. People tend to think of it as roles in the organisation, but one of the things we do with the organisations we work with as well is also think about where are they in their journey with the organisation. If you've got people that have been there 7 years or more, maybe they have a different type of content also available to them as part of the audience targeting, because they are our experts, they really know our business. So what else can we be offering them, both to retain them, but also what else can they contribute back to the organisation that somebody with less experience can't? The new employee onboarding centre, much like the dashboard item that you saw here, to Wes's point, is audience targeted. You're not going to have a new employee onboarding area for somebody that's been in the business longer than 6 to 12 months. It's also possible with Viva Connections to navigate our intranet, which is also going to help people to find the content that they need. So we've talked about tailored navigation experience for the individual based on role and time within the organisation, and we can access that from our Viva dashboard as well, from across the resources tab here. And we can also target that content. So this is my week 3 plan as a new employee. That's on my dashboard. That's helping me to navigate to content that I want, and I'm also able here to navigate my intranet content as well. And as somebody in the engineering team, I've got the content to do with production has been elevated for me to help me in doing my work. Add-in 365 also offer something called a content confidence kit, which is a bot capability to allow me to ask my questions very quickly, and you can see that that also manifests within Viva Connections. So I've got a really, really personalised dashboard, I've got a buddy, I know what my week 3 looks like, I've also got my tailored intranet, I've got a bot there to support me as well, which will help us to retain the people that join our organisation.
Okay, so what we've seen there is 2 of many scenarios that you can solve using the Viva Connections capability. So really Viva is more than the intranet. An intranet is a content source for the experience. You're going to look to combine that with communities, you're going to look to combine that with the team's working areas. And some of those are interesting combinations, because if you consider that the membership of a Teams team or the membership of a Yammer community becomes an audience, you can then leverage to target content. You have this lovely virtual circle of doing work, being part of that drives the experience of updates and news and targets back from the wider publishing experience.
And Viva is so much more useful to an organisation if you move away from shipping your org chart and you actually start thinking about the sorts of tasks people are trying to complete. I will say, I might get in trouble with Wes later, but with all of the clients in the brochures in front of you, they were all initially a little bit resistant to moving away from that model, because you had heads of department saying, well, this is my stuff, this is where it should live in my department. And we worked with them to help them understand that if you shift that and you see it more from the employee's perspective, that in the employee centre should be information to do with their expenses that might have sat in finance previously, alongside information about policies, that actually you can have an employee experience centre that's really useful for the individual, and it's made up of content from lots of different departments. I'm very pleased to say they're all subsequently very happy with that decision, because they've had good adoption and good feedback on that approach to architecture within the platform. Okay. So thank you very much for attending. We hope it was useful to you. Does anyone have any questions about any of that, or anything sort of top of mind at the moment?
Many questions. That seems to be a super complex portfolio and opportunities that you have with this product. I mean, it's just overwhelmingly complex at the end.
But the way we approach it, it can feel complicated because there's lots of technologies with service names, which is not helpful, right? There's Yammer, Viva, SharePoint, Insights. One of the things we do up front, which we'd recommend to anybody, is something called success definition, which is where you take 30 minutes to talk with each member of the leadership, not about technology or intranets, but to say, what's the CEO asked you to deliver upon? And within that half an hour, explain back how having this sort of employee experience set up can help them to meet their goals. At that point, you can develop a set of objectives which are reflecting the goals of the organisation. We talked about having a task-based architecture and not shipping the org chart. That's where it starts. What's the business trying to do? And when you look to meet each of those objectives, you can use the right bits of technology to meet that objective, and that's how we certainly deliver really useful intranets, rather than something that is trying to work out a complex matrix of departments and technologies. You know, it's very simple. What are you trying to do? And then what are the right bits of tech to meet that? Saying that, appreciating how complex it is, and not ever wanting to, or rather wanting to move away from architecture sessions where we're saying, oh, so what do you want from your department centre, or what do you want from your product centre? We do have templates for everything as a starter point, and it's so good because we find that clients bring the right stakeholders into the room, bash it about for 2 hours to make it specific to that organisation. You might not need process in your departments. And then making that specific to them is a really good way to go about it, because people are better responding to something they can see. Everybody's happier starting from something that other people have used. And so, you know, there is complexity, but there are ways of stripping that out of a project in order to get to a good solution without everybody involved needing to know every last bit about the technology. Because it is hard to develop a SharePoint site without knowing what's available and what have you added in, and you know, what combination of services. So hence why we've gone down the templated route, and that is referenced in the brochure as well, because all of the clients in that brochure have used that approach to take the complexity out. Are there parts of the technology stack that seem particularly overwhelming to you, or
no,
just the?
Today is the first time I try to understand what Viva is as a product. Because I mean, it is at the end a product family in itself, is my understanding now. And
yeah, there's four pillars. One of them you've already got, which you've got SharePoint Online. So Viva Connections is what primarily we've been talking about. That's part of your SharePoint experience and licensing schemes. Things like learning topics and the more advanced analytics stuff, that's all that additional cost. So yes, it's a pillars thing, and you can pick and choose, like pick and mix which one you want.
Yeah. I think day one we would, you know, because Viva Connections are paid for already, we always incorporate Viva Connections as part of the initial intranet launch. Things like the insights topics, I mean, unless you've got something decent in it as a baseline, it's a lot of money to spend before you're in a position to do something useful with it. So phasing these sorts of projects can be very helpful. Are there any other questions or?
Yeah, sorry for arriving late. The session had overrun before. The buddy kind of piece that you talked about, is that an out-of-the-box thing that you've configured with what's there, or is that an add-in that you've added in?
That particular example is out of the box.
Right.
So if you were the owner of the dashboard, there's probably 20 cards that show up with different buddies. They're audience targeted, and then that is an out-of-the-box configuration of the dashboard, and then that light switch.
So it's effectively targeting a buddy at different areas.
Yeah. Identify the humans, identify the community that drives the connection, and then you're away and running.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you for coming. And please feedback because.